The girl can only live on the ceiling. Once she loses the shelter of a roof, she will fall into the sky from tens of thousands of meters above. This is because her gravity is completely opposite to ours. The ordinary sky we see every day is, to her, a terrifying bottomless abyss. Once she falls, she will plunge straight into the depths of the universe. And because their gravity works differently, food from the ground becomes a burden to her. Even after it enters her stomach, it continues to press painfully against her chest. Patema once lived on the surface as well. But many years ago, a massive experimental accident caused the direction of the Earth's gravity to reverse. Whether humans or buildings, everything was flung into the universe as a result. Countless lives were swallowed by the sky. In that tremendous catastrophe, a portion of humanity survived by pure luck, but the gravity within their bodies had already been inverted. They could no longer stand upon the ground. In order to survive, they were forced to abandon life on the surface. They fled deep underground instead, where they built an underground settlement. From that day on, all passages leading to the surface became absolute forbidden zones. No one was allowed to go near them, until one day, Patema accidentally fell into one of those passages. When she regained consciousness, she realized she was already close to the surface. Beneath her feet stretched an endless sky. She wanted to leave immediately, but her backpack had fallen onto the iron grating below. To retrieve it, she had no choice but to risk falling into the sky. At the moment she finally grabbed her backpack, she suddenly noticed a boy standing on the opposite side of the grating. His perspective was completely opposite from hers. The two of them stared at each other in that bizarre position for a long time. Then Patema's foot suddenly slipped, and she fell straight toward the sky. At that time, the boy was still completely stunned. It wasn't until he heard Patema's cry for help that he climbed onto the grating and tightly grabbed her hand. But what the boy never expected was that Patema possessed an enormous gravitational pull. The two of them drifted farther and farther from the ground, floating higher and higher into the air. Patema was filled with terror. The backpack on her back slipped off and fell downward. Instantly, Patema became much lighter. Only then did they stop rising into the sky and slowly drift back toward the ground. It wasn't until they returned safely to the surface that the two of them finally breathed a sigh of relief. What had just happened was far too dangerous. With no other choice, the boy took Patema to a nearby warehouse. Only then did Patema finally relax. She cautiously poked her head out to look beyond the shelter. The deep blue sky looked just like a terrifying abyss. With just a single glance, it felt as if her soul would be sucked away. Through their conversation, Patema learned that the boy's name was Eiji. He was a human who lived on the surface. It turned out that the catastrophe back then did not affect all of humanity. A large number of survivors still remained on the surface, and their gravity had never been altered. In order to survive, these survivors rebuilt human civilization and named their new homeland the Kingdom of Aiga. But precisely because of the painful trauma of the past, Aiga's supreme leader, Izumura, came to see the sky as an ill omen. He issued a law forbidding anyone from raising their head to look at the sky. Those humans who had once fallen into the sky were labeled by Izumura as deeply sinful and wicked beings, people who were unworthy of continuing to live in this world. But in order to maintain absolute control over its citizens, the Kingdom of Aiga deliberately concealed the fact that survivors still existed in the underground world. Izumura called these people inverts, and he secretly sent agents to hunt for their hidden base. With plans to wipe them out completely, they installed surveillance devices throughout every corner of the city, closely monitoring everything on the surface. Patema's appearance was soon detected by the government of Aiga, and they immediately dispatched security forces to capture her. Eiji also realized that the warehouse was no longer safe, so he decided to take Patema and leave at once. When their opposing gravity balanced each other out, the two of them tried to walk outside together. Eiji instantly felt his body grow incredibly light. With each step, he could leap forward a great distance. But before he could fully savor that strange sensation, a massive pit suddenly appeared ahead of them. The two of them fell straight down into it. Fortunately, their combined weight was light enough that they were not injured. At this moment, the security police were already closing in on them. Their only way out was to jump off the cliff and return to the underground world where Patema belonged. After a brief run-up to gather their strength, they finally managed to leap out of the deep pit. Just as they were celebrating their escape, a large net suddenly flew toward them. Eiji slammed into a rock and lost consciousness on the spot. the security police took Eiji back to the school and severely punished him. As for Patema, she was put in shackles and brought to the office of the security captain, Jaku. Jaku harbored extreme hatred toward the inverts. He had sworn to wipe them out completely. In order to force Patema to reveal the location of the underground base, Jaku deliberately dragged her outside a window. Beneath Patema's feet was a bottomless abyss. It seemed as though it would devour her the very next second. At the same time, the people in the underground base discovered that Patema was missing. They immediately sent a clansman named Porta to infiltrate the surface and search for her whereabouts. But the moment he arrived on the surface, he ran into Eiji. Upon realizing that his identity had been exposed, Porta hurriedly hid himself. But Eiji called out to him. After learning that Patema had been captured by the people of the Kingdom of Aiga, Porta furiously took Eiji back to the underground world. Everything here was completely opposite to the surface. Only at this moment did Eiji truly experience the terror of the endless abyss beneath his feet. He could finally empathize with Patema's fear, and to the people of this underground world, Eiji was the true invert. They brought Eiji to a safe location. Then they began to discuss how to rescue Patema. After careful deliberation, Eiji and Porta decided to infiltrate the surface through the central tower that ran through the underground and rescue the imprisoned Patema. But what they did not know was that Jaku had already set multiple traps there. At the same time, using the opposing pull of their gravity, Eiji and Porta successfully reached the surface building, but the area was filled with surveillance. It would be easy for the security police to detect them. Fortunately, Porta quickly pulled Eiji close and pressed their bodies tightly against the ceiling. Only then did they avoid this crisis. After that, the two of them slowly made their way upward along the building. At last, they reached the top floor. But there was no place left here for the inverts to stand. Eiji had no choice but to move forward alone. Jaku had deliberately transferred Patema to the glass tower at the top of the building. The place was surrounded by transparent walls. From there, the sky could be seen directly. It was the perfect place to torment an invert. Ever since being locked up here, Patema had been on the verge of mental collapse. Her fear was something ordinary people could never imagine. Eiji rushed forward and held her tightly in his arms. He swore that he would never abandon her again. But at that very moment, the lights at the top of the tower suddenly turned on. The security police swarmed out. They completely surrounded the two of them. At this point, there was no way left for them to retreat. Eiji smashed the glass, preparing to escape from the tower with Patema. But what he did not realize was that heavy lead weights were chained to Patema's feet. They nearly dragged both of them into the sky. Jaku was consumed by rage. He kicked Eiji violently to the side. Eiji tumbled repeatedly across the top of the tower. He was only a hair's breadth away from falling off the building. The Kingdom of Aiga would never allow inverts to exist. Anyone who dared to disrupt order would be shown no mercy. Jaku ordered his men to shoot Eiji. At the critical moment, Patema broke free from Jaku's control. She stepped on his body to gain momentum and hurled herself toward Eiji. The very next second, the two of them were like arrows released from a bow. They shot straight toward the sky. As they continued to rise, the two of them pierced straight through the clouds. At this moment, Eiji suddenly noticed that the starry sky above looked strange. It even resembled a massive circuit board hanging upside down in the heavens. As the two of them slowly descended, they unexpectedly arrived in a fantastical city. At the instant they touched down, the lead weight on Patema's leg nearly came loose, and Eiji almost fell as well because of it. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Patema tightly grasped Eiji's hands. Only then did the two of them finally have the chance to take in their surroundings. Although there were many modern buildings here, not a single person could be seen. Patema even found the backpack she had dropped earlier, not far away. They also discovered the aircraft that had once belonged to Eiji's father. The two of them decided to temporarily rest inside the aircraft. Ever since arriving here, Eiji had remained completely silent. He had once believed that he understood how Patema felt, but only after he himself became an invert did he truly understand the terror of the inverted world. The aircraft was equipped with anti-gravity lead blocks. Just as Patema was about to take one out, another backpack appeared in the corner. Inside it, they found Eiji's father's notebook. It recorded the entire process of how the aircraft had been built. Just as the two of them were absorbed in reading it, a scorching heat suddenly rose all around them. It felt as if the aircraft would melt in the very next second. By flipping through his father's notes, Eiji finally found the control switch of the aircraft. He hurriedly pulled the lever down. All of the anti-gravity lead blocks at the bottom immediately dropped off. With no anti-gravity force restraining it anymore, the aircraft began to gradually fall toward the ground. This scene was instantly captured by the surveillance of the Kingdom of Aiga. The security police were immediately mobilized in full force. They were preparing to carry out the arrest. Patema and Eiji held onto each other and jumped from the aircraft, but the security police pursued them relentlessly. Jaku's men raised a cannon and fired a flying net, intending to capture them alive. But this time, using the impact of the flying net, Eiji carried Patema and leaped rapidly toward the cliff. The two of them thus managed to escape the pursuit of the security police. At the same time, in the underground world, Patema's companions were praying for her. The very next second, Patema and Eiji appeared before them in a bizarre posture. They thought they were finally safe, but unexpectedly, Jaku chased after them in an aircraft. After a violent collision, Eiji and Patema fell deep into a bottomless tunnel, and Jaku, in his obsession to exterminate the inverts, had already descended into madness. At that moment, the adjutant beside him finally found his conscience and decided that he would no longer assist Jaku. Just as Jaku was about to shoot him, Porta rushed straight forward and embraced him. No one expected that this action would cause the jammed aircraft to slide and fall. Fortunately, the tunnel was not too deep. None of them were injured. But Jaku was unwilling to stop there. He pulled out his pistol and shot straight through Eiji's thigh. At that critical moment, Porta lunged forward. Although he managed to snatch Jaku's gun away, he himself also fell down. In order to let Eiji live, Patema resolved to perish together with Jaku, but she was no match for him at all. She was quickly subdued by Jaku. Just as Patema sank into despair, the ground at the bottom of the tunnel suddenly cracked open. After a blinding flash of white light, a massive void appeared at the bottom. Jaku had never imagined that, on the other side of the tunnel, there would exist yet another world. At this very moment, he finally experienced the terror of the endless abyss beneath his feet. At that moment, the aircraft at the edge fell down and struck Jaku directly. With Jaku's grip gone, Patema also began to rapidly fall into the tunnel. Eiji immediately rushed forward and caught her in his arms. This finally slowed their descent. At the crucial moment, Jaku's subordinates fired a flying net. They were finally saved. When Eiji regained consciousness, he realized that he had arrived in an inverted world. All things were hanging upside down. At this point in the story, the core meaning had already become clear. In truth, Eiji was the real invert, and Patema and her companions were the ones who were truly normal. The explosion caused by the failed gravity experiment back then swept across the entire Earth. Only a portion of the researchers remained unaffected, but in order to atone for that sin, they voluntarily went beneath the surface and built the present Kingdom of Aiga. For the surviving inverts, the sky in Eiji's world was in fact the surface of the Earth's core. The sudden extreme heat that appeared earlier was the best proof of this, and those buildings were actually an artificial climate system created by the researchers for the inverts. The central tower that connected the surface and the underground was jointly built by the inverts and the underground researchers. Its purpose was to make communication between the two groups more convenient. In addition to helping the inverts return to a normal life, the researchers were also devoted to repairing gravity experiments, and they dug out this tunnel leading to the surface. Later, for reasons unknown, the two groups completely cut off contact. As time passed, the inverts forgot their history and became firmly convinced that they themselves were the normal ones. From then on, fewer and fewer people on both sides knew the truth. Therefore, Eiji's world itself was a beautiful lie. A world created so that the true inverts could continue living on within gentle dreams.